Hello and welcome to Deep in Pact, proud member of the Duff Network where we dive deep into Wildbow's most tattooed work 5 years on. Coming up next is Elliot Diebold.
And that was Ruben Morehouse.
And we are back to talk about Subordination 6.4, which starts with Blake telling Conquest that he's got a plan, and Conquest is completely unsurprised.
Yeah, and so actually, before we dive into this, I know normally chapter summaries are something we do at the end of the chapter, but this is the most excited I think I've ever been to talk about a chapter for this podcast.
Oh, wow.
And I just have to, like, because in 6.3, I was sort of saying how I felt like that chapter was, you know, the calm before the storm. Like, we were basically seeing all the chess pieces that were on the board, and then this is really the chapter that delivers on that. Like, this last chapter, we saw all the pieces, and now it's about, like, setting up the board. Like, and that doesn't sound as exciting. Like, that similarly didn't really that similarly didn't really convey the amount of excitement I have for this chapter. Like, this was fantastic because it's not quite the action yet, but it's all the sort of character beats being delivered on that we were sort of reminded of last chapter. Like, this is, you know, everyone picking their sides and getting ready for you know, the big fight that's coming up. Like, I'm so excited.
Yeah, it is fun, isn't it? You do get to kind of the drafting of the teams is a part that's just it is just fun because it is like Blake picking his allies for the next arc or maybe more. Yeah, it really, you're right. Last chapter is kind of the setup for the setup. This is the real setup that gets you really hyped for what's about to come.
Yeah, well, exactly. Last chapter was pulling all the pieces out of the board, and this one's putting them on the board. And yeah, it's actually very exciting.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, as you said, Conquest is not at all surprised. And in fact, he goes on a bit of a rant about how he expected this because hope is built into humans because of natural selection of their fathers and kind of blah, blah, blah. And Blake kind of cuts him off, which was hilarious. But I thought what was even funnier was just after this, Blake sort of says, "Oh, well, actions speak louder than words," type thing, and Fel just has to jump in with like, "Have you been paying attention, like, at all?" Like,
yeah,
it's great. Like, Fel just completely undermines Blake's entire argument very quickly.
Actions not speaking louder than words is like practitioning 101.
Yeah. It's like the whole point of the awakening ceremony.
I like Blake. You said Blake cuts off Conquest, and you're right, he does. And we get this real vibe of Blake just kind of being over it to an extent. He obviously kind of has to play along a bit to get Conquest to go with his plan, but you really get the sense Blake is just kind of sick of all of this shit.
Yeah, I'm definitely... The theme that sort of is starting to come up is he's only really nice to people now, or like, genuinely considers what they're thinking in these last two chapters when it's useful for him. Like, you know, so with Isadora, it was sort of in his interest to keep her on side, whereas then when he was talking to the shepherd, it was just like a whole fuck you attitude.
Yeah.
And you see that here. When he's not actively trying to manipulate Conquest, all of his conversations with people are just like, he just doesn't have the time for subtext anymore. He's just, as you said, he's over it. He's just fucking fuck this, fuck that. Like, this is how it is.
Yeah, which is not probably the best move because it does, I don't know, he's probably burning some bridges.
Yeah, a lot of it to me came across as trying to appear powerful. Like, there's a lot of moments in this chapter where Blake is, you know, scared out of his mind, but trying to look more confident than he is. And I think it fits in with that a little bit, but there's also probably a tinge of just, he can't anymore. Like, he just can't.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
I also just wanted to pull out this whole bit where Conquest suggests that maybe he thought Blake was trying to sabotage himself by cutting himself open, and Blake's like, no, I did that to continue doing the things, and Conquest considers it, and he's like, I believe you. When the younger Bahame reported that you had bled yourself out, I thought you were trying to make yourself so weak as to be useless. And Blake just responds, well, I still beat him, so I couldn't have been that useless. and then there's just this little line about Duncan glowering at Blake, which is just, eat shit, Duncan. That
it's
was
a
hilarious.
solid burn, yeah. He totally did fuck over Duncan while, you know, in the middle of his terrible trials and being basically the weakest we've ever seen him.
Yeah, yeah. It was great. And then
Yeah.
I think the last thing I need to pull out from this starting bit, and this is the cut down version of what I wanted to pull out. There's so much great stuff in this whole chapter. But we learn the definition of a cabal, at least within this context, and it's like the term for a diabolist group or circle, and it's apparently a big buzzword for witch hunters.
Yeah.
Like Tyler has a bit of a reaction that I would deem appropriate to this, and Blake sort of realizes like a whole new level to how much he's done goofed by bringing these guys
he really
on
might have
board.
fucked over his friends here. Yeah. I like Tyler basically interjects with "oh shit" reactions multiple times throughout this chapter, and Blake is kind of like throughout the whole thing. He's kind of got this vibe of tried to tell you, tried to warn you.
Yeah, which like I don't think that's fair at all. I don't think there are any words that could possibly convey this appropriately in any convincing sort of manner. Like I think if he genuinely covered this, they probably would have thought that he was being hyperbolic anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for
like
sure.
it's I think that's probably a little unfair of him, but he's stressed, so I also get that reaction.
Yeah. So Conquest and Blake are talking, and Blake kind of reveals his plan to challenge Conquest to a contest. Basically, hey, prove that you can conquer me, and then I'll let you have dominion over me, I suppose.
Yeah, and there's some bits in here beforehand where he like tries to turn Laird and Conquest against each other, and like it goes even worse than his attempt to turn people against Laird at the council meeting back in Jacob's Bell.
Yeah.
I think Blake needs to realize that he's never going to find people who are willing to hate each other more than they hate him. It's just, but it's a good idea. I mean, well, no, it's not a good idea. It's in the top percentile of ideas available to him, I guess.
Yes, yeah, it's a good idea relative to all the other ideas he's had. I like the bit where he puts this contest to Conquest. He he says, "Conquest," I said, ignoring Lard. Sorry, Laird, not Lard. Yes? The seventh seal. Ah, yes, Conquest said. The Seventh Seal is a 1958 film that Conquest kind of knows is about a man challenging death, and Blake kind of spells it out later, but it's a pretty weird reference to make to talk about this challenge.
Yeah, it's pretty deep. Like this movie from over 50 years ago that's Swedish. Like obviously the whole choose your own game to play against death is a bit of a like pop culture recurring theme. This is just like a really obscure reference for Blake to pull out. Like I don't know what else to make of it. It's just weird. It was also a bit of a long shot to assume Conquest would know it. Like I know Conquest is old, but he doesn't really strike me as a movie night kind of guy, Like
yeah. I don't know. It was
a bold
pull.
strategy, but it worked, I guess.
Yeah. And so they're kind of defining terms to the challenge, and it's something I really like about this is it's so rushed. Conquest basically says, we will have decided the terms to this contest before the time is up, which means 1 minute and 30 seconds. And basically they have to rush through the terms, and Blake has to make some quick concessions because, if they don't finish the terms in 1 minute and 30 seconds, he's pretty much screwed.
Yeah, well, and that sort of brings up one of the things that's been underpinning this whole conversation up until now is Led just chimes in every now and then with an update on how long till Pose will be free. Like it's so fitting. It's so perfect that Led is the one giving the time updates. Like, it's such a nice little detail to the whole scene.
Yeah, obviously putting aside the time magic thing, it's just so like petty. Which is such a perfect thing for Laird to be reduced to.
It's great. And then of course Rose sort of chimes in for about the first time, asking Blake, "You went and got other people involved?" "Yes." "Without asking me?" "Stupid. So many things wrong with that plan." And Blake thinks to himself, "You've been through a lot. I'll let that slide." Which is just I love these two so much because. Like, Rose is right. This is fucking dumb. But we've already covered that. But this is so not the time and place. Like, it's so Rose to just have to feel the need to tell Blake that he did this thing wrong when, like, he doesn't need this right now. So, like, I'm probably more leaning towards Blake's side of it right now, but I just thought this was hilarious.
Yeah, it's really not the time, Blake. It seems like their relationship is getting more and more strained, and Blake even calls that out later in the chapter, which we'll get to, I suppose.
Yeah,
yeah.
it feels like there's even a bit more going on at the end of the chapter. Yeah, I guess we'll get there, but there's also this whole section where Blake kind of, as he's trying to convince Conquest to agree to the contest. And we've got to come up with a different word for that.
The challenge.
The challenge, yeah. As Blake's trying to get Conquest to agree to the challenge, they sort of get into this argument about what counts as conquest and what isn't. And I guess it's like a fishing expedition. Like a fishing expedition is the generous term for what's going on. But phrasing in some of it makes me feel like Blake is trying to convince Conquest what doesn't count as conquest, which I don't know how you're going to go there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a long shot. Conquest kind of rightly points out that this is a bit more like war or conflict, which is about, fighting for an ideal as opposed to the ideal of just dominating someone else. Yeah. And
yeah.
Blake tries to go for this because this will make Conquest want to agree, but it doesn't end up working.
No, I mean, what eventually works is he figures out if he says some sort of dumb stuff that angers Conquest and puts Conquest in a point where he has chicken, to conquer basically. Blake. Yeah.
He pulls the old, what are you scared?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of works because he basically puts Conquest in a situation where he has to conquer Blake, which is, sort of this whole thing about manipulating him. But I feel like the original part of this plan was also to hopefully make things less conquesty so that Conquest would be like expending power, because when he's not being conquesty, he expends power.
I
mean, it was always kind of a long shot that you could convince Conquest that something that isn't conquest is conquest. So, baiting it and creating the situation so your not ideal plan, but the plan you're going for, he needs to conquer you as a part of it, like, works.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I think this is probably the weakest part of his plan, but he does eventually get Conquest to agree by calling him chicken, as we kind of said. And they start to hash out the rules. They'll each choose 5 champions, and they'll battle in this kind of like real-life chess game where they can't use their own powers, but they can actively command their champions.
Move over Harry Potter wizard chess.
Yeah.
This is Pact wizard chess.
This is real wizard chess. It adds a lot of dimensions to Harry Potter wizard chess, I think. The game, of course, ends once one of them yields, or in Blake's case, dies. Although I don't think Conquest will kill Blake, because he obviously needs him to be his demon portal.
No, well, didn't we learn in Fell's part of the Fell lineage interlude that they seem to think Rose will be able to do it without Blake? So
yeah, actually, yeah.
So he could have Blake die. I'm sure he'd love that.
Either way, it's
maybe not.
Probably not. Great news.
No, and I mean that whole imbalance where, because obviously Conquest is immortal, so he has to yield, and like good luck getting Conquest to surrender. That doesn't really seem like his deal. But there is a sort of a number of times Blake intentionally leaves some loopholes for Conquest because he wants the challenge to seem slanted, so that Conquest will sort of feel like he has an advantage and say yes. And it's because he is giving him an advantage. Like it's not just seemingly, but I guess at best it's a bit better than Conquest thinks, because Blake is aware of these holes. It's kind of similar to what he tried to do to Pose, I think, and that didn't really work out, I would say. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still think it's a pretty clever plan on the whole. I mean, it's Blake has kind of pulled together things that have been floating around in his head for the past 2 arcs. And yes, it's not a fair contest, but it's a much better situation for Blake than just kind of being owned by Conquest. So it does give him a chance.
No, I mean, these rules wouldn't have been agreed to if Conquest, didn't think that he had the advantage in them. So it was probably necessary, but I mean, he is setting up a competition where the odds are even more stacked against him than they probably could be. Yeah, totally. I don't know. I guess Blake has to make some concessions to even get the situation to happen.
So Conquest accepts with a condition. When he's won the contest, he can demand what he wants of Blake. And Blake responds with, "Fuck me. I was expecting that and it still almost knocked the wind out of me to hear it. Fuck me. Fuck. It was scary and it was almost as bad as falling victim to the lawyers." And I want to pull this out because I don't know, is it feel worse than falling victim to the lawyers? Like, I don't know. Being one of these, falling victim to the lawyers really means agreeing to become a lawyer, which fucks over the world, I suppose, but, you know, he gets to just kind of go around and do errands.
I mean, so we think. Like, it may be worse than we're expecting, but on an individual level, I do have to agree that being owned by Conquest would seem worse. Overall. Just for you personally. But, yeah, no, it's an interesting moment where, you know, Blake knows this is coming, but it's still tough to hear. And that's kind of, you know, that's very realistic. I liked it.
Yeah, he basically is agreeing to be owned by Conquest if he loses this challenge, which was what was going to happen anyway. So I guess it is an out.
It's still, it'd be a powerful moment to go through. Just actively agreeing to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So now we have the two kings and they pick their pieces. Conquest picks all the strongest people around town, basically. Laird, the Eye, the Shepherd, the Astrologer, taking her away from Blake, and elder sister, so that he has kind of the Sisters of the Torch at his command. Blake basically has to pick all of the things that he already had given up to Conquest. He takes the Hyena, Pose, and Rose, as well as some left field picks with Maggie Holt and Fell.
Yes. Oh, I lost my shit when he picked Maggie. That was great. Yeah, it's... And I mean, there's this whole bit where he doesn't pick Tyler and Alexis, basically because he's banking on Conquest being so insecure that Conquest will still like lean towards the more powerful things and won't use a pick just to take something from Blake. I mean, he takes the Astrologer, but the Astrologer is a much bigger piece to take than
I think the Astrologer is a more tactical choice than Alexis.
Yeah, it's a less emotional choice, really. But talk about it being risky fucking business to be Blake's friend. Like Tyler and Alexis kind of call him out on this a little bit later, but there's this moment where Blake sort of looks at Alexis and she's like terrified, and because we haven't heard from her like all throughout this. I think Tyler's the one who's sort of standing there going, "Holy shit, like, oh my god, like people are going to torture us," and you know, Alexis is sort of being silent, and I think it's important that Blake gets this moment to turn around and see that no, like, she's fucking terrified.
Yeah, she's not just playing along. She seems kind of shocked with how this is all developing. But Conquest doesn't choose them. He does go for the more powerful picks, of course, as he is a bit of a insecure boss. He picks Fell, and it is. It is great. It's this team up that we've kind of been waiting for the past two arcs. And of course, Fell kind of wants to say no. He knows that this isn't a great shot, but it is his only shot. And so he kind of agrees to play along.
Well, I mean, Blake puts him in a pretty tough spot. Like, you know, Fell has been wanting to sort of make subtle moves, and Blake basically forces him to make a massive move against Conquest right now, or like help him stay in power. And it's a bit of like, he really forces Fell's hand. Like, I think Fell's response of "fuck you, but yes" sums it up perfectly. Especially because Conquest kind of subtly commands Fell to say no. Like, he's sort of like, Fell can say no, which makes it even more important when Fell says yes. I think the final bit from these picks I really wanted to pull was Rose is Blake's first pick, and so he says like, "I name Rose as my first." And Rose perks up, and she's like, "Why me?" and I feel like Blake. I'm reading condescension into this, but there's probably this like feeling of like, just come on, Rose. Like,
oh, come on, work with me.
I love this because like it's such a great embodiment of their characters. Like, Rose is so tactically focused that she didn't think Blake would pick her because she's not the tactical choice. Whereas it's so Blake to want to help her get out of Conquest. Like so of course he would pick her first, but like it doesn't occur to Rose. It's great.
It's really not the tactical choice, and I think it does kind of throw Rose off a bit. But they've picked their champions, and the Conquest begins. And Blake, as they're leaving, Blake makes Conquest relinquish his claim over for Rose, whose shackles fall away, and Fel, who is kind of released from his service for now.
Yeah. Woo! Freedom!
And Conquest says, "You are hereby freed. Let it be known, what I have claimed, I will reclaim."
Temporary freedom.
Yeah, so stakes are up, and everyone's kind of banking on Blake not fucking up. We'll see. Blake and his crew head outside, and they emerge into a kind of spirit world version of Toronto.
Yeah, it's... I mean, you sort of skipped over Blake taking Pose. Like, obviously Pose is one of his champions. And this whole moment is just boss, where he takes Pose. Like, he gets Pose to permanently agree to hop back into the book entirely whenever commanded. Like, and I mean, based on the phrasing, like, that's a forever thing. It's not just within the confines of this challenge. So that's huge. But just watching Blake power play over Pose was great. Like, he keeps just walking away whenever Pose tries to, like, soften the deal. Yeah, it's hilarious.
I kind of feel bad for Pose because they spent so much time, like, negotiating the finer details of this contract that was going to be set up. And then Pose comes out and he's just completely fucked.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I kind of felt a bit bad for him, and then I kept having to remind myself that he's like a demon imp thing, so like, fuck him, but also, like, I did kind of feel bad.
Yeah. So Blake and the crew get outside, and he sees Rose kind of off to the side in the mirror, and he thinks, Rose hadn't even said hi to my new recruits, my circle, my cabal. I kind of missed the point where I could talk things out with her. We needed to return to that point. Need being the operative word. I wasn't sure we could survive if we couldn't. So yeah, they're in a bad place.
Yeah, and I mean, we're seeing that more within the ranks in this bit as well. Like, Alexis and Tyler are coming to terms with what's just happened, I think. Yeah. And also the fact that Blake did kind of risk them. He did use them as pawns, basically. Yeah. And gamble with their lives, or even more than their lives, I don't know. Like, gambled with putting them in a fate worse than death situation. And Evan's also quite upset at Blake for picking the hyena. Like, we saw a bunch last chapter, like, we called it out twice, how Evan doesn't really tend to let go of these things, and Blake, doesn't really argue against the whole hyena thing very well. He just sort of says, oh, well, Conquest can't have it, and then he has that bit where he tells everyone to shut up because he just needs a moment to think. But it doesn't really feel like Evan's going to let this go, and I'm worried about this maybe driving a little wedge into Evan and Blake's working relationship, which so far has been pretty good.
Yeah, so we have Blake's entire cabal, his champions. Basically, none of them really like him that much at this point. I mean, except maybe Maggie, who is a left field pick. She's the only one that doesn't have a kind of grudge against him at the moment.
Yeah, although, again, once she sees what he's signed her up for, she might.
Yeah, true. So Blake and his crew, they head back to Blake's apartment to kind of prepare for the coming fight, and Fel kind of informs Blake what he was trying to tell him during the tower scene, that he's basically completely alone for this contest.
Yeah, like, because part of the challenge's rules are people who haven't been named as champions are sort of free to pick their own sides, and Blake and Conquest can't really pressure them too much. Like, they can't order them, but they can, like, appeal to them. Yeah. And basically Fella's telling Blake that no one is going to join you, including Isadora, because she really liked the stability. So that's another Elliot prediction shot down 100% in the very next chapter.
Yeah, pretty much.
I feel like I'm impressively bad at this prediction game at this point. Like, I just need to start predicting the exact opposite of what I think is going to happen, and apparently I'll be doing better. So with that in mind, I predict that things are about to get better for Blake, Alexis, Tyler, Tiffany. They're all going to be fine. Yep. It's all uphill from here.
Yep, we'll put that down in the prediction sheet. They're all 100% fine. So Fel basically explains that Conquest is a bit of a figurehead. He's predictable, and everyone kind of knows that he's a lot more bark than bite in certain situations. And so they're all kind of happy for this immortal figurehead to just be the bear the brunt of everyone's political schemings while they just kind of sit in the background.
Yeah, and it's funny because we actually talked about this like a fair bit. I think right at the start of Arc 4, like we mentioned how if Blake had picked up on this so quickly, it was a bit ridiculous to assume that the others hadn't, and they were holding him there for some reason. And I guess that sort of slipped my mind, but I hadn't considered this for a while. But it just does make sense. Like having an immortal who's predictable would just bring this sort of stability. You know, like obviously there's some issues with him, but I guess compared to the instability of, as they said, all the ways practitioners can kill people, like this would bring a certain level of consistency to the way Toronto has been running for, over 100 years?
Yeah. And this obviously kind of really sells that the Sphinx is not keen to help out. I wonder what it means for Jeremy, because he wasn't named as one of the champions, right? Obviously, he has a vested interest in keeping Blake in Toronto and kind of screwing him over, but also he clearly is not a fan of Conquest and has made his own moves. I'm kind of curious where his allegiances will end up.
Yeah, no, for sure. He's maybe going to end up being the wild card in this whole fight, because Fel and Conquest are definitely both under the impression that Jeremy is anti-Blake for some reason. And we obviously know why he has been appearing that way. But you're right, he does seem to be one of the few people who would like to take Conquest's throne, and maybe he'll either betray the Duchamps or prioritize helping Blake and that mission over the Duchamp mission to fuck Blake over. We'll see.
It might even end up that the Duchamps kind of see it working out.
Change their mind.
Yeah, we'll see. I want to pull out this line because it kind of brought up a thought that I hadn't thought before on read-throughs, where Blake is trying to get in contact with Maggie, and he says to Fel, "Can I have your phone?" I asked. "You don't have a cell phone?" Fel asked me. No. I'd like to know how you get by in this day and age without a phone. "I just do," I said. "I never really thought about it." He gave me a funny look, but he handed over his phone. So this is the second beat of Blake not having a phone. The other one happening when he kind of had to search for Evan's... search for info about Evan before he went and kind of claimed him. And this just seems so odd to me that it jumped out at me this time about as maybe hints of like Erasure Demon shenanigans. Like maybe Blake was using his phone as a light and it got eaten.
I love this idea. Like it's perfect. I'm headcanoning it regardless of whether it's actually true or not. It like the bit where Blake needed to borrow Fel's phone doesn't quite make sense to me, because as far as I can tell, the Erasure Demon doesn't add fake memories. That bit would have just not happened in the memories or in the text. But that's one little prickle against, like, I just love the rest of this so much. I'm going to ignore that bit and just talk it up to some other weirdness or something. Like Blake's hesitation in answering Fel is what really sells it to me. Like Blake's like, no, like it's only just occurred to him that he doesn't have a phone, which really sells this whole thing to me.
Maybe because thinking about Blake, he is kind of the kind of person where you can imagine he wouldn't have a mobile phone.
Or he may not have had a smartphone. Like he might have had one of those old Nokia things. So he needed Fel's for the Googling and the Google Maps thing, but he didn't usually need it to call people.
Yeah, thinking about it as a character beat for Blake, like it is such an odd thing that my mind jumps to Erasure Demon, but it might just be that there is something to Blake's past that kind of explains this a bit more. Or maybe it's just that all Wild Boy protagonists have weird relationships with telephones. Anyway.
Yeah. And so obviously he uses this phone to message Maggie on social media because he can't find her phone number online, which is a good thing, I think. But like, what do you reckon he wrote? Like how do you just hit someone up on like Facebook? It's like, hey Maggie, it's your mate Blake. Well, especially, it doesn't actually mention that he's signed into his own accounts, but I assume he did because I can't picture Fel having like an Instagram account. But yeah, I just love to know what this message was to Maggie. Like, how do you convince this poor teenage girl to come down to Toronto and fight in a war for you?
Hey, I've signed you up to this war for Toronto. See you soon. You've been conscripted.
And the last thing I really wanted to bring up is I love the extra details we get on the spirit world now that Blake's in it, but not in a way that he's, because he's like 3/4 dead. And like all these little details, like how things that like get lots of attention or love and well-traveled places are very vibrant and like larger and healthier. And
Yeah.
Places that are neglected are actually smaller. Like it lines up with animistic beliefs really well. But it also makes me think, like, it seems like the spirit world is very much at the mercy of the mortal realm. Like, because we get the impression that things like Isidore and stuff, this is like their sort of native world, and they dip into the mortal one because stuff happens there. But like, you gotta think they're probably a bit bitter about that because their world is dominated so much by the mortal world, and humans are idiots. And they don't have as much control over mortals as they used to. So like, I wonder, like, that'd be pretty frustrating to be these powerful beings whose world is so easily manipulated by a bunch of idiots.
Yeah, I think the two are probably linked, and so obviously, if humans stop visiting a popular tourist site or whatever, it kind of shrivels up. But there's probably a reverse to that, where if others kind of pour energy into a place, it becomes more appealing to humans, and it kind of revitalizes a bit. I think it's probably not a one-way relationship.
No, that's a good point. We've seen how runes encourage the spirits to encourage humans to do stuff. So I think, at the end of the day, it's more to do with the spirits, and I guess we've seen that people from both ends can manipulate those. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of 6.4. Starting next chapter, we have the Conquest contest begin for real.
Oh, I can't wait.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Before then, we decided that we would take a look at people's comments from 5 years ago, see what people are saying about how the chapters are playing out. Before we do that, remember, we still have our discussion question going on, so make sure you leave your responses to that in our discussion thread, either for last week's chapter or this week's, and we'll talk about it in, I think, 2 chapters' time, since this is a month of heavy bonus episodes.
I forget the question's exact phrasing right now, but it'll be in that discussion thread, both those discussion threads, so you can see it there. But it's something along the lines of introducing people to Pact in the world of Pact and how you do that.
Yep, a crash course in 15 minutes or less. How do you introduce your friends to the world of Pact? New practitioners. So anyway, let's dive into some comments from 5 years ago. I put out a comment by a user called Negadarkwing. And their comment was talking about how now that Maggie's back into this probably counts as Blood and Fire round 2, or what we assume is round 2, knowing that we've seen round 1. This doesn't bode well for Maggie, because Conquest kind of has the Eye of the Storm, a literal spirit of fire and danger under his service.
And the Eye, which is very fire related too.
Yeah, so things are going to get pretty bad here, I think.
I have to go double check. So, because with Maggie's whole thing, there were going to be 3 lots of the blood and fire type stuff, right?
Yeah.
So this, okay. So this is potentially round 2. Like, I don't think she's already had a round 2. This wouldn't be round 3.
Yeah. We definitely don't know about a previous round 2 that she's had.
Yeah. Actually, it makes me think, you know how all the champions got moved into the spirit world as a part of this? I mean, I don't know how far spirit long distance communication goes, but I wonder if Maggie just got dumped into the spirit world already. Like, that'd be. I don't think that's what's happened. Maybe it'll be as she comes into Toronto, but I just have this hilarious image of her like eating dinner or something, and then she just gets transported into the spirit world. Parents. Yeah. So then I've picked out a comment by a user named Subak, and I'm just going to read the whole thing verbatim because it works so well. So first off, they open with a quote from Conquest, who says, "For my third, I take the Elder Bahame. He owes me a service for my mercy in regards to his nephew." And then Subak points out, Conquest, you don't really need to call in that favor. Like, fucking with Blake is apparently Laird's sole hobby. He'd do it for free. You could probably even charge him for the privilege of getting to kick the shit out of Blake, which was just a hilarious little observation. Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I like that, for Laird and probably Jeremy Meath and Duncan and a bunch of people around town, maybe even Pose included, they kind of would just like to fuck with Blake. I mean, Conquest could have had open sign-ups for his champions, and there probably would have been a fair amount of action there. It really speaks to his manipulability that Blake was able to get him to pick all the sort of boring strong picks, and all the people that he would have gone that would have fucked him up anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like Laird would have been on Team Conquest regardless of whether he was picked. It was a stupid pick.
Yeah. Anyway, it's it's good that Blake managed to successfully predict it and kind of simulate his behavior so much.
Yeah.
That's the end of our discussion about Subordination 6.4. I'm very excited to get into the next arc, but that will have to wait, unfortunately. That will have to wait until Wednesday the 8th, when we'll be talking about 6.5.
And if you want to talk about the discussion question or anything else in 6.4 between now and then, head into the discussion thread, which is in the show notes below.
Yes. If you want more information about the show, you can head on over to doofmedia.com, where you'll find info on Deep in Pact, as well as all the other shows on the Doof Media network.
Yes, in fact, on the Doof Media network right now, they're having the Parahumans fan art contest.
Yes.
Which I believe closes on May 27th at midnight, and that's Pacific time.
Yeah. The theme for the contest is relationships. So if you're keen, get your best relationship themed material, make a nice piece of artwork, and you could win. I think there's a cash prize as well as like runner-up prizes and the glory of being the best fan artist in the Parahumans community.
Yeah, and one of the perks for being a patron of the Doof Network is being able to vote in that contest. So as well as submitting some art for it, why don't you come and join us in the Doof Patreon and get to have your say in which one you think is the best.
Yes, and now entrepreneuring Patreon might realize that they will have a small ability to sway the odds in their favor if they sign up.
That's right. You can vote for yourself as well.
Is that? I haven't actually checked if that's true or not, but it seems on its surface like a possible exploit. I mean, obviously there'll be a number of people voting, but who knows?
If I could do art, I could test out this theory, but I can't do art, so I could not.
Yes. While you're on Patreon, you should also check out Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/wildbow. Obviously, he makes all these great stories, and he is completely supported by his audience, so do that. Support him. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so apart from that, I guess we'll see everyone on Wednesday for 6.5.
See you then.